Welcome to the archive section with the second half of our interview with Crystal Clark for this month.
Yay!
Okay, so we were talking
Hey.
about, we left that little teaser at the end of the first hour about John Hutchinson.
Yes. Now this is where it really gets exciting, and it's hard to tell when you're in the middle of it. How the energy was flowing during the first half. So if it had a negative feel to it, I do want to apologize for it. But I have found that in order for people to take the sacred science seriously as a very real technology, you have to address that side of it. You have to address how it's being weaponized. But this is where it gets exciting. Once people can wrap their brain around the idea, oh my God, this is real. I can transform my world with this. This is where it gets really, really exciting. And this is where the rebuilding phase comes in. And this is what really I live for. This is what makes my day. John Hutchison is the John Hutchison that people refer to when they talk about the Hutchison effect. So what he did is he took some samples of the water down in the Gulf, super contaminated. It had Corexit in it, and it had tons of oil and all that junk in it. So, and I have the actual lab results from the tests he did, and I don't think that they're on my website, but before this airs, I'll make sure I get it up there. But so he had the water tested before and after in terms of parts per million, and once he had this water, he used the solfeggio tones, the Gregorian chants, and some other frequency techniques on the water. He didn't strain it. He didn't do anything else but use frequencies. When the water was tested again, it came up clean. Now, the rational mind wants to say, well, how is that possible? Because we're used to the idea that if something's dirty and you want to clean it, you need to physically remove the particles from it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But this is what's so great about the sacred science is we're talking about quantum technologies now. And they do work. They are real. So there's a few different ways that you can look at what happened in this respect. A really neat story, I actually got it from a book review. It was a story about quantum spookiness, this article was, but it referenced a bunch of different authors in their work, and one of them was an experiment that was done with elderly people, and the name of the book, if I remember properly, was The Field, in terms of this experiment, written by Lynn McTaggart. And I finally got the book. I actually got it about a week ago, and I haven't had time to read it yet. But anyway, in this experiment, what happened was they took a bunch of elderly people and they put them into a virtual environment, and it was a virtual recreation of the 1950s. Everything was from that period, the carpet, the furniture, the television shows they watched, even the newspapers that they got every morning. It was all a complete, just like a virtual reality program. And what happened was so incredible, because what happened is while these people were in that environment, which was from a part of their past, they literally became younger while they lived it. So that's the kind of thing that people have to understand. And it may have sounded really strange, but I did listen to an interview that Alex Collier did not very long ago, where he talked about how he was working with alien races who said they had a healing technology that could take slices of your I can't remember the exact term he used, but
I heard that.
yeah. So you know what I'm talking about, of your being, and if you were ill, they could take a slice out, basically like slides. You know how if you go on vacation you have slides, right? It was kind of like that, where they could take a slide of when you were younger and take it and overlay it onto who you were now and reduce the disease, eliminate it. So these technologies are very interrelated, especially when you look at what happened with these people that became younger. And when I say they became younger, I mean they literally became younger. They, any eyesight problems they had, any of the kind of diseases that we would associate with aging, they began to regenerate from being in this environment. So something very similar happened with what John Hutchison did in the Gulf with these solfeggio tones and the Gregorian chants. And I know that it sounds really strange, but the way that these things are all connected is going to become our future. So they're very, very important things for us to understand. And it may sound like a stretch to say this when Christians talk about the story about Jesus turning water into wine. Now that's a story that they really love. And why not? That's a very incredible thing, right? What they have a hard time with is the idea that in the scripture where it says that there will come a time when you and I will do greater things than he did.
Mm-hmm.
This is how we get there. The sacred science is how we get there. And in this particular case, what we're talking about is transmutation. So what John Hutchison did in the Gulf with this water, it wasn't a process of straining all of these chemicals out. It was a process of transmutation. Now, when he went to the Gulf, he took all of his equipment, and I don't know if you guys have seen these videos on YouTube, but they're out there. When he got down there, because the equipment that he was using took up so much space, and of course the Gulf is a very large place, he was looking for someone to put his trailer on a barge so that he could be towed around the Gulf and play this frequency. And you don't have to expose all of the water to the frequency because the energy ripples go out. It's the hundredth monkey thing, basically.
Right.
Once you expose enough of it, it continues, the process continues. He couldn't get anybody to help him. They thought he was crazy. They thought he was a nut, and this man could have healed the Gulf of Mexico with nothing but frequency. We can do that to our own bodies, we can do it to our animals, we can do it to our planet, but if we don't know that, we can't use that technology for ourselves.
He was arrested, wasn't he?
You know, I didn't hear if he was arrested, but I know that they weren't nice. In the videos that I saw, they really thought he was kind of a nut, and they didn't want to cooperate, which is really sad, right? And that goes back to this idea of ignorance. If all of these people that he had approached had understood the sacred science, don't you think they would have helped him?
Well, they totally just outright denied that he could possibly do it, even without even looking at his data.
Exactly. They wouldn't even entertain it.
Right.
And so that's kind of the frustration. Again, is that, and it's ratcheting up, and I'm hearing it more and more and more about, how humanity is just out of control. So we need these specific groups of families who know better than we do to fix everything. But the fact of the matter is that they have kept this technology for themselves. So they have no business looking down on us for not employing it when they didn't release it. And even now that we have people trying to use it, they're being denied because their fellow man don't understand how vital this technology is. And so really when I say we're talking about the laws of creation, that's what they are. But generally when you say that, the first thing that pops into a person's mind is religion.
Yeah.
So, and that's unfortunate, but it's the truth. And that's another thing that I wanted to kind of get into is another thing that I'm hearing a lot, which goes back to a lot of what we've talked about, is the personal truth. And I want to address this because is there a such thing as a personal truth? There is, of course, but it needs to be understood properly. And what I mean by that is perception is everything. What a person perceives to be reality becomes the reality he interacts with or reacts to, but not necessarily the reality that is. And that's a very, very key thing to understand, which is why perceptions are controlled so tightly. And we see that everywhere. The propaganda is endless. But that's what that's about. And in the first book, I talk about it in terms of a lens. that you can zoom in with. So if you're zoomed in all the way on reality, you see this teeny tiny piece of it. And then as you slowly pan the camera out, you see a little bit more and you see a little bit more. And then, of course, the new parts that you see help you understand the other part better. And another way to look at it, there's a really great video on YouTube about consciousness, and there's a fellow standing behind a podium. I don't recall his name, I apologize. But he's talking about how if you have a golf ball-sized consciousness, you experience a golf ball-sized reality.
Oh, who's that? Yes, I know.
His last name's Lynch.
Lynch.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you guys are familiar with it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's his way of saying it. In my book, I used the lens, the zooming in and out, but it's really the same principle. And basically, what that means is that our perception of reality has been narrowed intentionally to such a degree that we can't see all of these other things going on, and that becomes a misinterpretation a lot of times for a personal truth. And what I mean by that is, as an example, especially in terms of the one law, because remember, these laws, they're like computer codes is really a good way to look at it. These create, regenerate, and uphold life. So let's say a fellow, he comes down here, he's living out his program on the earth, and he is supposed to become a master of horticulture and maybe feed a lot of people. That is his personal truth from the standpoint that each and every one of us are meant to contribute to the law in our own unique way, but we have to do it in harmony, and we can't do it in harmony if we don't understand it. So from this individual's perspective, he's supposed to do this wonderful thing for humanity, which he himself will grow from through the experience. But if he doesn't understand the sacred science and he doesn't understand the laws of nature, he may not know that you have to water these plants, right? Mm-hmm. Every plant on this planet needs water. That is a law that cannot be changed. If you don't understand it, you won't give them water. And then what will happen to this particular fellow and anybody who depended on him for food, he's going to starve. Now, will he learn the lesson of the law? He will, but he will learn it through suffering. And that is why this information is so important to me, and why I say that it transcends religion and government and all of these other things, because if you and I can just know what does it take to create, regenerate, and uphold life, then we can live in harmony with those laws. And then we get to a place where there's enough for everyone. Nobody needs to starve. Nobody needs to watch their planet die. Nobody needs to send their children to foreign countries to die over, old energy, right? Hmm. There will be enough for everyone, but again, that goes back to my frustration with the blinders that have been put on, because we are contributing to our own suffering because we don't know. Like this poor fellow who didn't, he was supposed to feed the village or whatever, and nobody taught him that he needed water to do it, so he didn't water the plants, and everybody, they starved because you can't get food that way. So that's the context that I hope that people will look at it through, because when we know what it takes, we know what to apply. We know how to use the energy the right way. And because we do have a situation where the energy is being used in a lot of the wrong ways, it's very much a situation where, like Hulda Clark, right, a positive offset frequency. And I think that's really important. So the rebuilding phase of humanity is going to be a very, very, very exciting time. When people are caught in the fear of all of these things going away, the financial system's going to crash and all of these other things, and what do we do? If people know the sacred science, they will know how to rebuild, and we will never get caught in this place again. We will be on our way to the experience that we were always supposed to have, but we keep missing it because we get stuck on this loop. So really, that's why it's so important to understand. There's something I'm looking for when I'm talking. So if I'm talking in circles, I'm trying to. Okay, here we go. Okay, this is from a really great book that I just got recently, and it's the Edgar Cayce Companion. Wonderful, wonderful book. And he's talking about soul development, and so this is kind of my motto. He says it far more eloquently than I do, but this is my motto in that the spiritual knowledge needs to be applied in a practical way, or the knowledge just doesn't matter, right? It doesn't do any good to know, hey, I need to water my plant and still not water it, right? It's the same outcome. So this is Edgar Cayce's way of saying this, and he's referring to these laws. And this is from reading 900-70 for people who may want to go look it up. But it says, as man applies the laws of which he becomes conscious, the development of man brings forth those results merited by that knowledge. This we find, then, is evolution. Man's development through man's acquiring, man's understanding of spiritual laws, of earthly laws, of God's laws, and applying the same. So that's why it's so important. I mean, it really, really is. As we do more shows, there are so many really incredible things I want to talk about, because I know that there are people involved in things that they don't understand. And when I say that, I think that you and I get the gist of what I mean by that. Go ahead.
There's one element of this whole thing that I've seen in people's eyes, is that letting go of the physical reality can be frightening. Going into the esoteric, the things that they can't see, touch, feel, people get disturbed by it.
Yeah. Well, they've been taught it's evil, first of all, right? That doesn't really help.
Yeah. It's a sin. It's a sin to even contemplate it.
Right, and that couldn't be further from the truth. And you guys, we talked about this last time. The devil is a chimera. It's all of this stuff just stuck together into this thing that doesn't function anymore. And I mean, how can an organization have that kind of a symbol for something and not understand what it means? They surely must have understood at some point, but why they don't teach it, I don't know. But there are other people out there that are going to teach it, so at this point, I don't really think it matters. But the issue for me is that, are there entities involved in our experience that are working towards our demise? Yes, there are. But the important thing about that is there are 7 billion people on this planet, and if we really had to narrow it down to how many people really have it in for us and who are behind this, I don't really even know that we could get to 200 or 300.
Yeah.
So how does it happen? I mean, how did we get where we are then? If there's just this tiny handful of people, it's because of ignorance. And I think that's a really important thing to focus on, because I know deep down in my heart and my soul, I know that there are perhaps even millions of people involved in things that they don't fully understand their place in.
I would say billions.
Yeah, well, I mean more in terms of an implementation phase, like global warming, for example. We have a lot of people that are really, really pushing that. And you've seen some of the grotesque commercials, the one where the kids, their heads explode if they don't want to, lower their carbon footprint. Did you see that?
I don't watch TV, so.
Oh,
yeah.
Well, I didn't see it on TV either. It was on the internet for a while, and they actually banned it because there was an outcry over it. It was basically this teacher standing up in front of this class. The way it starts out, it's a bunch of little kids, and she's asking people what they're going to do to lower their carbon footprint. And the kids who don't get involved, she says, "Oh, just a minute." She pushes this button, and their heads explode all over these other kids. I mean, blood and guts go flying.
Wow.
They thought that was cute. They thought that was funny. So
wow.
The people who made this obviously believe it, And they're passionate about it. They're very passionate about it. They want to send a very strong message because they really believe all of the propaganda that global warming is causing all of these problems. And again, that goes back to, if they knew the truth, would they still feel that way? Would they still devote their energy to something that, in fact, is bad for them? I don't think they would, because I know that I wouldn't.
That kind of reminds me, I was teaching a student, and he brought up global warming, and he asked me, what's your opinion on it? I said, I don't believe it. And he was in shock, like, oh my God, you don't believe it. So then I started telling him, well, you have the solar system is heating up, and the galaxy, they've also measured that it's heating up. I said, that's not global warming, are we also affecting, is the carbon also affecting the sun, the solar system, the Milky Way? And then he was in shock. And I was like, yeah, there's more to the story than what they're telling you. I said, that's just a ploy to make more money.
That's exactly right. And here's something interesting that I contemplated once, because, again, I look at everything through the lens of the sacred science, but the idea of chemtrails being put out with aluminum and all of these particles is generally sold under the guise that, well, we're really concerned about all of the solar energy that may come in, so we're reflecting it or deflecting it, right? Now, I personally don't believe that's why they're doing it, and I know they're really trying to spin that hard right now. But let's say for a moment that they were. Let's just suppose. Well, where is all the sunlight they're deflecting going, right? Right back out into the solar system. So couldn't you even use that as an argument to say, well, maybe that's why our solar system is heating up, because we're deflecting all of the light and the heat right back out into it. There's a lot of different things going on. Now, there's something I want to touch on really quick about chemtrails. And this is actually Masaru Emoto's book that we were talking about earlier, and it's his first book, The Hidden Messages in Water. And when we talked about how the sun also is affected by a lot of other things, which is really important. It's not, we do have an effect, and we have a profound effect, but there are other factors involved. So, I thought I had it marked here. Hang on a second. This is really.
While you're looking, I want to read something that I wrote back in I think 1988 that popped into my head, and that's what brought that fear thing up. I wrote this for this guy I was talking to while I was in jail for a little while, and I wrote this for this guy there. I can remember when I first arrived. I wasn't sure what it meant to be alive. Confusion was the only sure thing. I didn't know what it was, just being. I looked over here, I looked over there. I opened the door and saw blinding light. It filled me with fright. Slam, click, click. Safe behind the locked door. Sometimes I wonder about that light. I remember the fright. I push it behind and go about doing my time. Is time my friend or time my foe? Is this really who I am? Only I can answer. When it gets quiet, I think, is that me that stinks? The smell of my actions? Why can't I change? Am I doomed to a life of crime? Will I do more time? There's this guy I talked to and he started to get through. Slam, click, click. Am I really that dense? Am I really that proud? I built quite a fence to be one of the crowd. Should I try it again? Could he be right? Why won't I believe? Is it my fright?
Ta-da. That's really good. yeah, that was really, really good. And what's so great about it is that it's from a very personal perspective, but do you have any idea how many people are going to resonate with that, because we really aren't that different from each other?
Yeah.
Something told me I should put that out here tonight, so.
Wonderful. I think it's real. Oh, it was beautiful. Yeah, really beautiful. Okay, so, and thanks for being patient while I found this too. I thought I had it marked, but, okay, so this is something else that's really another link in the chain, I guess we could say. So in what I'm going to read, this is about Masaru Emoto having discovered it, and occult teachings teach this, that there are metals that are associated with certain planets. But for the outsider, really the sacred science is basically just saying they resonate with each other. That's what it means. So he says, according to Buddhism, the human being is born with 108 earthly desires, such as confusion, attachment, jealousy, and vanity, which torture us throughout our lives. I think it is logical to conclude that these 108 earthly desires have counterparts in the 108 elements. For example, the vibrations created by irritation, and I don't think I read this on your show last time, but if I did,
No, you didn't.
No, you didn't.
Okay. It's a very important thing for people to compare what I'm going to say to what they know is in chemtrails. Okay? He says, for example, the vibrations created by irritation are equivalent to those of mercury, by anger to those of lead, and by sadness and sorrow to those of aluminum. In the same way, uncertainty is related to cadmium, despair to steel, and stress to zinc. Now, if we move forward a little bit, he says, a physicist conducted an experiment in which he studied how the positions of the stars affected water. What he found was that when Saturn has a large influence on Earth, lead responded by being soaked up by the paper, while the other elements such as copper, silver, and steel showed little or no response. We can deduce from this that there is a close connection between Saturn and lead. Metals resonate the emotions and moods of people, and so the next logical deduction is that Saturn is closely related to the emotion of anger. So this is another really, okay. So this is another really important thing to understand. Again, the sacred science, it's fractal. So what happens on the teeny tiny scale is happening at the larger scale. It's just the ripples are larger. So even the metals on our planet have an association, vibratorily speaking, with the planets in our solar system. So, if we know that, let's say a planetary alignment is coming where, I'm trying to phrase it properly. Let's say Japan is sitting on a bunch of lead, let's say, based on that example. And we know that Saturn is going to become more of a problem based on its position in the solar system for us. A couple of different things could happen, right? You could have people getting sick because even if there was a little bit of lead in their food or water, because it's going to be resonating with its partner, its counterpart in the solar system, you're going to have a vibrational increase, very much the same as what Masaru Emoto discovered in the tap water in Tokyo on the same day as the war. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So now imagine if you could predict earthquakes through this. What if you understood that this particular planet has this type of influence corresponding to this type of metal? And let's say that Japan is laced, let's say all of its fault lines are laced with a very specific type of metal, or maybe a combination, and you're going to see something happen in the solar system with the planets that resonate with those metals. Could you predict an earthquake that way?
No.
Why not?
Yeah.
And also, now, this may sound really far out, and I get that, but people have to understand that in every single way the sacred science has been weaponized, they've done it because they understand what you and I are talking about. And I'll give you an example. In Dr. Nick Begich's book, Angels Don't Play This Harp, and he's talking about harp up in Alaska, he talks about cyclotronic resonance and how the military discovered. I guarantee you, they have a database full of every frequency that every metal on this planet exists. But what he discovered is that through testing, lithium is a naturally occurring chemical in the human brain. If they know the frequency of it, and they did because they did the test, by applying a resonating beam at the body with that exact same frequency, they could amplify it as though the person was given a massive dose. They did it in experiments. Okay, so So even though when I make the suggestion that if we understood what types of metals were in what types of countries, geologically speaking, and we were able to connect that to their counterparts vibrationally in the stars, could we have a better idea of what's going on down here? Yes, we could, because you have military personnel that are already perfecting this in weapon systems. So it does work. The key for us as individuals is how can we use it, not as a weapon, not to destroy, but to create, regenerate, and uphold life. And there are far more of us than there are of them. Now, another thing I want to talk about, how much time do we have so I don't go on for too long?
We got a half hour.
Okay. So another thing I want to talk about is it's common today to hear metaphysical teachers say, the best thing that you can do for this shift that's happening is to work on self. And people who don't really have a good grasp of what we're talking about can't connect that back to anything meaningful other than mystic mumbo-jumbo. And that's not mystic mumbo-jumbo. And the reason for that, beyond a lot of the examples that we've already given, especially through Masaru Emoto's work with the Gulf War, it's important for people to realize that the mind of man, meaning mankind, and the mind of Earth are connected. It's a shared experience, which is something that Masaru Emoto really kind of proved in a way from a little bit different angle in his observations in the tap water in Tokyo through resonance. When we as individuals, looking at this strictly from the energy perspective, if we are riddled with guilt and shame and fear, those are very, very heavy emotions. Those emotions become part of what the planet experiences. You know, like it's really not a good analogy, but it does, I guess, help provide a visual in a way. You know, you'll hear people like, you know, even Dolores Cannon say we're like fleas on a dog. But as far as us being on the earth goes, but we are connected. Our minds are connected. So when the earth itself, even the Schumann resonance is rising. The earth is going through its own shift. If we want to go, we have two choices. We can ourselves shift to meet that energy. Or if we don't do that, what will happen is because she is going to go. It's the dog shaking all the fleas off, right? Because people talk about the earth healing. The earth is healing from, that's what a lot of these earth changes are. Notwithstanding all of the weaponization, because there are a lot of things going on right now that are being attributed to natural earth changes that are not natural. I'm sure you guys recognize that.
Right.
But there is a part of it that we personally are connected to, because when the earth has all of this pain and it itself is trying to shake off all of this negative emotion and all of this trauma, where did it come from? It came from us. That's where it came from. So it's a very responsible and yet very personal thing to recognize that and to stop doing it, right? So if we are saddled with regret and fear and shame, the earth feels that, and those are very, very heavy energies. So as we work on self, we are also working on the earth. So basically, on a more simpler level, what I'm saying is everybody needs to take a piece of that pain that the earth is trying to shake off and own it. Own your piece of that. Take it in and transmute it through love and forgiveness. Forgive yourself for what you've done. We've all done things we regret. We don't need to live in that space of shame and fear forever. We weren't supposed to. It's a learning experience. Can we see it that way? Can we just look at that and say, okay, well, that particular event, really sucked. I don't want to do it again, but I learned my lesson. That's the key. Or do we? I mean, it doesn't. It's. I guess what I'm saying is, it's not good for us to hang on to that fear and shame and all of these other negative emotions and believe that we're only punishing self, because we're not. It doesn't work that way.
That's
I was gonna.
That's when we have dis-ease within ourselves.
Yeah, we're fixing the self, because this is really important to understand. When people get really kind of bent out of shape over this stuff because they think it's, New Age hocus pocus, regardless of what they say, what I hear is, I don't want to grow and you can't make me. And that's true. I can't make anybody grow. I can't make anybody do anything. But the universe at large does practice tough love. And I don't think it's wise to say to the universe, you can't make me grow.
Yeah.
Because I tried it. It didn't go well for me. I won't do it again, that's for sure. Because the harder people resist, the harder they get pushed. And that's when we have earth changes that are natural, that are cataclysmic. That's what I'm trying to say. It doesn't have to happen that way. It wasn't supposed to happen that way on a cataclysmic level. And I think that, and we can come back to this, in a little bit if you want, but the shift that happened that people are talking about, I really do believe that was a quantum shift, and that it was done with love, and it was done consciously through intention, not to learn the lessons through suffering. And I think that we made a quantum leap over something. We kind of fast forwarded to a new experience. So it's important for people to understand that it is important to work on self, because self affects everything. Self affects its neighbor, its children, its water, its planet, its solar system. It's an important connection to understand.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, this show is going to air on March 9th. Is that correct, Ramon? I think so. Yeah.
Yes.
So, but I do I hold some little meetings here with a few kids, and I call them kids. They're in their mid-20s, but and we just sit and we talk, and I get my quote unquote downloads. And last week I was really connected in very strong, and what was flowing through was really good stuff. And I got something about a 5-day period between March 2nd and March 7th. So I suppose when some sort of a shift happening then. So by the time this airs, we'll know what it was, I suppose, or if it was anything.
Oh, I see. So you mean another one coming?
Yes, I feel one coming. There's something between the I got March 7th first, and then I got March 2nd. So it's somewhere between March 2nd and 7th.
Wow. Okay. Well, hopefully it's something. It's. I mean, that's the thing. The shifts aren't supposed to be painful. They're supposed to be. It's just evolution. Evolution doesn't have to be painful. And this shift that happened. This is something that. I know it sounds crazy. I know it does, but I know what I saw. I know that back in the fall of 2010, I saw the moon jump across the sky. There were other people who saw similar things going on. And ironically, through my research, it came to me after this happened that there is somewhat of a precedent for this. And I don't know if you guys have ever read the book, The Isaiah Effect by Greg Braden. I read it. Yeah, I don't particularly follow his work, and I've always been the kind of researcher who goes to a bookstore and puts a finger on a book and thumbs through it. So this ended up on my bookshelf several years ago, but there's a really fantastic story in here about how he and a group of people were on a bus, and I believe they were on their way to the pyramids. There were several people on the bus, and it was a very long journey through kind of treacherous terrain, I guess you could say, and there was a military escort in the front of the bus and in the back of the bus. And he and some other people on the bus were reminiscing about how they had been there before and how beautiful it was and how they couldn't wait to get there. And all of a sudden the bus stopped. The bus driver got out, and they looked around and they noticed that the vehicle behind them had stopped and the vehicle in front of them had stopped, and all of these military personnel and the bus driver are all very, very upset about something. And they can't, you know, the people inside the bus can't figure out what the problem was, because from where, as far as they're concerned, they can see the ocean and whatnot, and so they realize, well, they're almost there. You know, there's no flat tires. They can't understand what the problem is, and they notice that everybody outside the bus is all in an uproar over something, and they're all tapping at their watches. And so he asked the bus driver, he says, well, what's wrong? I don't understand. He said, we're almost there. You know, there's no problem. And the bus driver said, yes, but we shouldn't be there yet. He said, that's the problem. He said, this is a 7-hour ride, and we made it in 4 hours.
Wow.
Where did the rest of the time go?
I've heard this story before. Not that one particular, but just people in general.
Yeah, it happens. Yeah. It really does happen, and that's something I want to stress, because when this shift happened that I saw was during a phase where it was the most global meditations I had probably ever seen. And they were also using very key dates, and there was a very important one on 10/10/2010 that was done.
Right.
And these dates are considered by a lot of people to be they're keys of sorts, harmonic keys, which kind of goes back to that tumbler and the lock idea that we talked about earlier, in a sense. And so it was very important to realign the energies on these dates. And of course, they did another one on 11/11, I think, for 11 minutes. And these were, you know, all over the world. There was a lot of people participating, but I know that in general, more and more people are meditating and praying on an individual level. And what I really believe happened is that we jumped past something, that we jumped forward, very much like that situation on the bus. And I think that it was a very good thing. And really, truthfully, the more time goes by, the more I'm convinced, because the shadow world didn't even talk about it, which is really surprising, considering that they love to use that kind of stuff to scare people to death. I mean, look at the movie 2012, right? So, but the fact that they didn't even take the opportunity to try to scare us to death with it tells me I don't even think they know it happened for a while, which means it wasn't even them. So now all of a sudden, we have a little bit of information here and there about, you know, airports, like the one in Florida having to realign its runways, right? And now I'm not an expert in this stuff, so maybe I've got it wrong, but I'm looking at it just from a very practical perspective. I've heard a lot of people talking about this because we have all these animals dying, and people are trying to relate it to the shifts in magnetic energy in the planet. And so a lot of people are saying, and I think this is really being perpetuated from the shadow world side.
You mean it's not fireworks?
Right. Well, in this particular case, I'm specifically referring to the airport being renumbered because of a shift. The shadow world is really downplaying the idea that a physical shift took place, which really surprises me, because I thought they would be all over that. Because really what you're getting is, oh, no, nothing moves physically. It's just the interior energies of the earth are changing. That's why we're renumbering stuff. So like, again, I'm not an expert, but I'm just saying, can somebody please explain to me how, if it's just the energy inside the earth, the magnetic field inside the earth changing, and the earth isn't actually moving physically, how did the sun come up 2 days early in Greenland?
Right, or the 12 minutes in Alaska that it wasn't supposed to be up.
Yeah, so, I mean, okay, so people need to look at this stuff in a really practical way. I'm sorry, but I'm having a really hard time making the jump from the magnetic field just changed to the sun came up 2 days early. Something moved. Yeah. Something moved. It was us. So now, was it the whole planet? Was it, the axis tilted? Or was it just the continent? I don't know what it was. But I can tell you that whatever happened that day, it happened a long time ago. They're just now talking about it because obviously if the sun comes up 2 days early in Greenland, you really can't hide it anymore. And nobody died. And I think that's I mean, I think it's kind of funny. I do, because they didn't do it. It wasn't them. It was us.
It's funny. There's nothing in the news about that or anything.
No.
Yeah.
Nothing. So they're trying to avoid the topic altogether. And again, what happened back in the fall. It didn't just happen. But that's what was so great about it. There were
So
no
is it a
massive
coincidence
tidal
that
waves.
Is it a coincidence that we all were doing? A lot of us were part of big meditations and smaller ones.
No, absolutely, it was not a coincidence. No, that's what did it. That's what I'm saying. That's what triggered it. So we don't have to learn the lessons through suffering. Now, there is a shadow on this planet that is convinced that we have to learn it that way. But we don't have to learn it that way. It's like the man we were talking about earlier who for whatever reason didn't know he needed to water his tree, so he learned a lesson through suffering. Well, next time, hopefully he'll water the tree, right? But that's the key. You don't have to learn the lesson through suffering. If you know the laws, you know your connection to them, and for people who are having a hard time with that idea, again, go back to Masaru Emoto's work. And what's so great about that, Tom, is you did the experiment, and it came out exactly like all the other ones do.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's really important because this was something I emphasized on a different show that I did around the time that Hutchison did his water experiment, or his healing on the water. People say we need an external savior. We need aliens to fix it. We need Jesus to come and fix it. But take a look at what Hutchison did in the Gulf. He is just a man. He is not a messiah. He is not from another planet. He just had to know how. And that's what I'm trying to get people to understand. As long as you know how, there are no more limitations. There is none. Consciousness is our limitation, which is why the blinders have been put on. It goes back to that golf ball size. You know, if you're only looking at it with a golf ball size consciousness, you only see reality through that small space, but it's infinite, and we are attached to that infinite part of it. So as soon as you can get people to go beyond, you know, all of these artificial constructs and get the blinders off, we are limitless. There are no more limitations to what we can do. So I really do try to tell as many people as I can, and I'm sure I'll probably take some heat for it, because can I prove it? No, but I know what I saw, and I'm convinced that we made a quantum jump and that we did it for the betterment of humanity, and it took a lot of people to do it. But the great thing about it is that we can do it again, right?
Yeah, speaking of, there's a really big one coming on 11/11/11. That's with Shelley Yates and Fire the Grid kind of stuff.
Yep.
I don't know if you're familiar with that, Crystal.
I have heard of that, and yes, absolutely, people should participate. I think that people should not wait until 11/11/2011 to participate. But again, that is a harmonic key, that particular date. So that particular date is of significance, meaning that we need to make sure that we are coding that energy properly with love and kindness and the kind of future that we want, not learning the lessons through suffering. But there are, it's a daily thing. I mean, if we want to make that kind of a super powerful shift, it takes an awful lot of people working together, but every single human being on this planet can meditate every day. I mean, I thank the planet. I thank the animals, I thank the water, I thank the sun. Because they give us life, and they are alive. They are conscious. They are conscious beings. And people are missing that. It's not just some big ball in the sky that, it's not a big light bulb. I mean, it's alive, So, so I'm really excited. I think some really exciting things are happening, and I think that the more people can open themselves up to the idea that the human mind is not just a material mind, but also connected to the universal mind. There are no limitations.
Can I tell you a quick story?
I love stories, absolutely.
I was so I'm growing mints in my living room, and I said, okay, they're pretty big. I can cut some to make some tea. And so I'm there, like, saying thank you, and I'm saying thank you to the plant. And I'm there, and I'm like, okay, which other part can I cut? And I heard in my head clearly, that's enough. Like, kind of like an attitude. And I said, oh, I'm sorry, okay, all right, that's enough. You're right. And I stepped away from the plant. And it was, and I told my wife, because she was sitting on the computer while I'm doing this, and she just started laughing. And I was like, wow.
That's great.
Yeah, so I know what you mean by having that connection.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, people just need to stop giving their power away to people that don't have their best intentions, in mind, because, all of this fear and all of this stuff going on, growing is always a hard thing to do, no matter what part of our lives it's in. I mean, even businesses go through that phase, right? The growing pains. Whenever something grows, it's always a painful experience because it just is. But how painful, the idea that how painful that experience is not up to us, I think is very wrong. Now are they using technologies that are trying to make it an even more painful experience? Yeah, they are. They absolutely are. But how many of them are there, and how many of us are there? So that's something really important to keep in mind.
Yeah.
We are not powerless.
We definitely are not.
Yeah, I get a lot when I'm teaching English. I get a lot, oh, it's too difficult. And I always refer to one thing that every single human being went through is it's not more difficult than learning how to walk. Trust me.
Right.
Learning how to walk is probably, I would say, is the most difficult thing to learn how to do. I mean, how long does it take the average baby? And how many bumps and bruises? And you never hear a baby complaining, oh, it's too difficult.
Oh, right. And my son, he fell a lot. And it used to surprise me. I couldn't believe he never really got hurt.
Yeah.
You think, ooh, and then, they're fine. You're like, oh. So, and then the other thing, too, if somebody were to say to me, well, it's too difficult, I think I would say, do you mean it's too difficult to say you're sorry? Is it too difficult to say thank you? Why is that so hard?
Yeah.
You're not asking people to bend over backwards and do backflips. All we're asking people to do, which is something we're asking of ourselves, which is a very ongoing, constant process. It doesn't mean we're perfect by any means, but all I'm asking people to do is let the best you unfold. Don't fight it. And the best you will show gratitude, will show forgiveness. Forgiveness is going to be so important over the next, I would say, 3, 4, 5 years. Forgiveness and graciousness, because so many people are going to want to do that I told you so thing. Yeah, don't do that. Don't do that. Just love people. Just love them. People love me. I'm not perfect. They love me. I love people who aren't perfect. I love them. It's not a difficult thing to do. There are people who won't let you love them, though. I'm sure you've experienced that. If people really want to fight it, they have that right. They absolutely have that right, but it just makes the experience more difficult. So that's all the universe is asking of all of us right now. Let the best you unfold. Let it out. Get rid of all the stuff that doesn't work and let it go, because you don't need it. And that goes back to all this duality nonsense that we have. And I don't mean duality in its proper sense. I mean the duality in the way that we see it. Me against you, him against her. We are together. We are going to go through it together. Why can't we do that with open hearts? And why can't we, I don't have a problem saying to my planet that I love her. I love her and all of her angels of life. I love the water. I love the fish in the ocean. I love the animals in the air. They're beautiful and they're quite necessary for life as we know it. And that's something that I want to get into a little bit more in the next show that we do. I want to go into connections that are really important this way, especially in terms of things like bioacoustic envelopes and how all that feedback, life creation requires a constant feedback loop to exist in balance. And if I haven't, I'll tell a really quick story because we might be running out of time. But there was a friend of mine. I met him through the work I was doing. Wonderful, wonderful guy who was having a problem with his right leg. So he went to the healer on the Soul Project. And again, neither of these two women charge money. They won't even charge anything. I mean, if they want to barter and you have something they want, that's great. But if you want to just, say a prayer, that's fine. They're not really asking for anything other than to just help people. But so he went to her and she told him this really great story. She said to him, we take energy in through the left side of our body, and energy goes out through the right side of the body. And this is the proper interpretation of integration and disintegration. One is taking energy in, and the other one is giving it back out, because it's very much like that scene in Avatar. Energy is only borrowed. It constantly is in motion. When it's not in motion, you get problems. And in this particular gentleman's case, that's what happened. So she explained to him, because you take in through the left side of your body and the energy flows out through the right side of your body, she said, because you've been taking more than you're giving. The energy in your right leg has been stagnating, and that's what's causing your illness. Now, he's, a really great guy, just a normal person. He's like, yeah, you're right, I do that. He said, I try not to. We all try not to. He says, but I know I have a tendency to do that. What he had never realized, though, is how that would impact him physically. So, these were just really, really important things. And I guess, once you kind of lay them out and talk about them, they seem really obvious. But at the same time, how many people would have recognized that if they give more than they take, or if they take more than they give, they could get an illness? And of course, our own planet is based on this feedback loop, always the feedback loop. The energy constantly has to be giving and taking. For example, with our trees, right? Our trees lose their leaves. They go through a very active period of growth, and that's the period of integration, where they're taking all this great stuff from the soil and the rain and the sun to grow. But then it comes to the point where they have to give it back for the cycle to be continuous, and so they drop all their leaves on the ground, right on the earth where the roots would take it up again once it's broken down. The problem is, because we are materialistic, don't pay attention to nature, and we think, well, I don't want my yard to look worse than my neighbor's, so I'm going to rake all these leaves up, put them in a trash bag, and send them off to the dump. What sense does that make, right? I mean, they fall where they fall because that's part of the process. So human beings go through it. The universe goes through it. It's all of these things are very, very natural. The things that we're so afraid of are natural things. But we live in a culture where the blinders have been put on, and we've all been pushed into the direction of very, very strict and out of control materialism. Now, when I say that, I don't want to be confused with people who say, I'm one of these, phony green movement people. Look, I don't want population control. That's not an answer. Murder to save a life is still murder. I'm not a fan of that. But I do think that we do a lot of really stupid things that we shouldn't be doing. And so a lot of the stuff that we're talking about now is going to become commonplace in this new future that we're going to have. Again, what I caution people about is, how do you want to get there? Do you want to learn the lesson through suffering? It's going to happen. It's going to happen. No matter how bad people don't want it to happen, it's going to happen. We are going to get where we're going. It's just the path. There's a less abrasive, excuse me, a less abrasive path to get there. And so when we say, oh, love and light and everything's great, well, I'm not saying everything's great, because obviously it's not. We have some real problems. But love is important. If we approached everything through love, we would get a lot farther. And then, of course, like we talked about in the last interview, if I gave my son fluoride out of love, well, that was stupid, but I didn't know. So now that I know, out of love, I don't do it. So love and knowledge are really two sides of the same coin, and that coin is rolling down the road to a brand new future, and I'm excited about it. I know that it's frustrating for people to have to hear about some of the negative ways the technology is being used, but once we get past that, once people can say, okay, I get how they're doing it, the focus then can shift to, how do we build something better?
Right.
So that's really where I want to go, and I really want to try to encourage people who are specialists, and I don't care what they specialize in, botany, astrology, astronomy, whatever. Everybody can benefit from this, because if we all work together, we could really make some wonderful, wonderful things happen. Kind of like we were talking about earlier with the elements and how the other planets affect the sun and how the other planets affect the elements. So here's the thing, right? How many scientists have done experiments in a lab where it didn't come out the same every time because there were different planets in a different alignment every time, so they just said, oh, it doesn't work.
Right.
Right? Well, of course it works, but are you considering all of the elements involved? I mean, what if there's a new type of metal or alloy that we could create if we were able to do it under the right planetary conditions, because we could meld the right things, but because they tried it in October and in January and in February, and they got a different result each time, oh, well, it just doesn't work. As long as everything is being considered, I think we could do some really great things.
Yes, well, we need to wrap up here. Some good stuff, Crystal.
Oh, I don't want to wrap up.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, next time, we'll get more into the positive side of it. How can we, what does this mean? What does that mean? If we combined this with that, what could we do with it? And I think that's, for me, that's really the exciting thing.
For me too. I like to see what we can do to create positive change.
Yeah. One of the things I would like to say closing is there's Alex Coiler was the first person I heard say this, and it hit me so hard that I went and tattooed it on my forearm. The love you deny is the pain you carry. And
Yes,
to everybody,
I remember that.
And to everybody, it means something completely different. But I just want to leave everybody with that, because I feel like that coincides with everything you've been saying.
You know what? I think you're right, and I'm so glad that you said that, because it's been a long time since I heard him say it, and I thought it was absolutely beautiful, because it's very, very true. In fact, say it one more time in case people didn't catch it the first time.
The love you deny is the pain you carry.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Beautiful. I love it.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
So, okay, well, everybody, thank you for listening. We do appreciate our audience, and hope that everybody gets something out of this, because that's what we are trying to do. Oh,
and thank you to all 40 countries, now 40.
Oh, right. Let's see, who did we pick up? We picked up
Philippines.
The Philippines, yes.
Yay.
Welcome, listeners in the Philippines. Anyways, visit Crystal's website, thesoulsociety.com. Visit our website, conscious-tv.com. Well, hang on. You're listening to this on Conscious TV, so anyways.
Check out the other pages.
Yeah, check out the other pages. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Really quick, that page that you mentioned before, could Ramon mention it again, where you guys were looking for people to, talk about things that could help create change? What was that again?
Our new paradigm page.
Yeah, it's called New Paradigm Ideas. Just email us any ideas you guys have, how, sustainable homes, or any way to get out of the system, the old paradigm system that we're in now, and to get into the new, because it's something completely new. So for a lot of us, how does that happen? So
right.
Yeah, send all that stuff in. We'll try to integrate everything we can and put out as many ideas as we can get out there. So
yeah.
All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. Good night.
Okay. Good night, you guys.